Retro.
Hello there. This is James Arnold Taylor, the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi, and you're listening to Dennis and Jay on Podcast Stardust. Their behavior is continuously unexpected. So uncivilized.
Welcome to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
And it's Monday, so that means we're starting the week off with another episode in our The Clone Wars rewatch. But before we get into all of the goodness from the animated galaxy from far, far away, Jay, you remind everyone where we can be found on social media.
You got it, Dennis. We are very easily and conveniently found on Facebook and Instagram at Podcast Stardust.
Okay, the dish is aligned. The signal's boosted to maximum output. The shield is down, and we are now broadcasting to another galaxy. This is episode 20 from season 2. So that means after this, we only got 2 episodes left. The third of which we've actually already covered on the podcast. So we'll re-air that after we get past the next episode. So be on the lookout for that. There'll be a bonus episode in your feed. So now that I've said all that and stalled for a little bit so that everyone who maybe hasn't seen this episode that came out so many years ago has a chance to pause and get away if they want to go watch it first. Jay, you want to go ahead and give us the summary of the episode, please?
Absolutely. When the Jedi Cruiser, commanded by Jedi Knights Anakin Skywalker and Mace Windu, welcomes aboard a squad of clone cadets, they are unaware that danger is in their midst. Boba Fett has infiltrated the squad of cadets and attempts to assassinate Mace Windu in an act of revenge for the death of his father, Jango Fett. Although Boba's attempt fails with some outside assistance from bounty hunters Aurra Sing and Bossk, he manages to sabotage the Jedi Cruiser, forcing nearly everyone to evacuate. Once aboard an escape pod, Boba is retrieved by Aurra Sing and Bossk on Jango's starship.
Yeah, so this is an interesting episode. I've got some thoughts about it, and I know you do too. Jay, what are your overall thoughts on this episode?
Oh, so many thoughts. But first of all, I have to say how much the music in this episode hit me big time. I mean, shout out to Kevin Kiner, and there's just so many great musical things going on in this episode. And for me, of course, you know, I have a little bit of a fetish with Boba Fett and the whole lineage there. So again, it was just great to see this kind of genesis into the Clone Wars with Boba and how his relationship, not only with the bounty hunters, but his very kind of strained relationship with his own origins, I think, are kind of explored. Not explicitly in this episode, but they are. And then also Anakin and Mace's relationship once again. So, but I mean, great episode.
Yeah, this is a good episode. I think it's better because of the trilogy episodes that it is in, because by itself, while it's good, it's not great. But when you put it with the other 2 episodes that come after this, I think it really elevates this episode as part of that collective trilogy of episodes here. I like it quite a bit. I think, for one thing, this is like the first episode that made Boba Fett a far more complicated character than anything we'd seen before. Because what have we seen before? We've seen him standing silently, for the most part, with very few lines in The Empire Strikes Back. You know, it's like, he's worth more to me alive than dead. You know, put Captain Solo in the cargo hold. Those are the type of lines he had. And The Empire Strikes and Return of the Jedi. And then we got to see him in Attack of the Clones as a kid. But, you know, it's just kind of like, what does he say of consequence in that movie? The most impactful thing he had done on screen was react to Jango's death. You know, first after Mace Windu decapitates Jango, and then second after he lifts up Jango's helmet and kind of like puts his forehead to it. But this episode really makes Boba a person when it
Yes.
comes down to it. And it's kind of subtle in the way it does it for the most part, and with some very overt instances. But we don't even know that this is Boba if you aren't keyed into that fact when the episode starts. But then
Mhm.
all the motivation rather becomes clear after that. So
Indeed, yeah, and I think it's so interesting too, watching the featurette again, how Dave Filoni was, almost like, "Well, here we are,
yeah,
Boba Fett." Like, he didn't even really wanna explore this particular character much more because of everything, that you just mentioned as far as the original trilogy and then what treatment he got in Attack of the Clones.
yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, there was plenty of Legends material that addressed Boba Fett at the time that the likes of George Lucas were not reading. And so that did not impact their interpretation of that character whatsoever. And more specifically, when it came to Dave Filoni, it was like, I did not want to do episodes that caused a reinterpretation of the films, I think is how he
Mhm,
put it there.
mhm.
And he made sure to point out that this is something that George Lucas wanted, and what George Lucas wanted when it came to the Clone Wars, George Lucas got, because how can you deny that, man? But but I don't know, for all the depth that they give Boba Fett in this episode, it really changes my interpretation of the films so much as it enhances my interpretation of Attack of the Clones.
Oh, no, I totally agree because it gives us that insight to, as we know, Django had requested an unaltered clone for himself that
Hmm.
he wanted to be able to raise. And that's the little fortune cookie that we get at the very beginning. And I'm probably going to butcher the exact verbiage of this, but, it's the memory of my father is more important, than the
Who he
I
actually
can't remember
was.
who he actually
Yeah.
was, that's
Something,
what it was.
yeah.
Yes,
Right. To that, to
and
those words of effect.
so yeah, and so, I mean, basically, this whole episode is Boba dealing with the aftermath of that rage of
Hmm.
the only person that, he really ever kind of knew. I mean, yeah, he was brought up on Camino with the Kaminoans and everything, but he had a relationship with his dad. And
Hmm.
so, he's coming from a very different lens, with life experiences than these other clones are, which is both kind of, one of those things that, gosh, could he have gone the other way and, and stayed with them, which is a weird thing to think about.
Indeed. Indeed. All right. Well, we got a lot of things to talk about with this episode, so let's dive into some more of the details. And the first thing I got on my notes is Anakin and Mace in this episode. When the whole thing starts off, you've got this Republic cruiser that's pulling up to the Jedi Cruiser, which is the Endurance, and they board, and there's just kind of like this awe moment for these cadets, these kids. The clones are all standing at attention, and then they line up, and all of a sudden Anakin and Mace wander into the room, and Mace isn't making introductions, and Anakin just kind of like brushes right past him and is talking, with all this bravado about their training and what they're going to experience and how exciting it is. Right before they get called away to the bridge for
Mhm.
some of the news, and then as they're leaving, Mace is pointing out, it's just kind of like, you know, oh, this is too bad for you. You're not getting your chance to, like, show off and
Show
inspire
off,
them
yeah.
here. And this kind of goes back to some of the Mace Windu conversations we've been having recently with his appearances in the Clone
Mhm.
Wars, where this stuff really humanizes him here. He doesn't dislike Anakin at this moment, but
Right.
he knows who Anakin is. Anakin is a bit of a showboat. It goes back to Anakin's days pod racing during the Phantom Menace. And Anakin was once a kid. I think he sees a bit of himself with these clone cadets. That they are, about the age, maybe a little older than he was when he joined the Jedi Order. And like, you can, like, rise and be something great. Just look at me, the type of situation.
Oh, yeah, and I mean, and he was already labeled the hero with no fear, by this
Hmm.
time, and, this is such a gosh, when you see this and he's so encouraging to these little younglings essentially. And no, they're not Jedi younglings, but they're kids. And he really wanted to, as May said, show off for them. But, Anakin even said it's our duty to pass on our knowledge to the next generation. And then just knowing what happens in the Jedi Temple, obviously in Revenge of the Sith, it's just kind of heartbreaking in that way.
Indeed, indeed. So, addressing the clone cadets more specifically here, they've got it's like 8 of them or so, and there's a couple of them that are kind of picking on Boba, who is the new guy. But then we get this one clone whose name is Jax, who appears to be, I don't know if he actually has rank, but all of the other little cadets defer to him here, and he's trying to make Boba feel welcome, and Boba's going under the name Lucky at the time. There, did you have any observations about these kids overall?
Oh yeah, and I mean, I think it's really cool how they recreated kind of the same dynamic that we even see among the older clones, the more seasoned, more experienced ones. And I think that this younger kid, he really gave off a lot of like Rex vibes, Jax. I think that he kind of stepped forward as sort of the natural born leader. And then you had another one that was hot shot, that was a little full of himself and was, the first one to be like, oh, why did you miss the briefing or whatever? And Boba's like, oh, I broke my arm. And he's like, well, you should be able to lose your arm and still show up,
Yeah,
kind of
that
a
was
thing.
crazy bravado.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and
Yeah.
at this point, I mean, these are like super young kids. I mean, and if you take into consideration their growth acceleration, they're like basically toddlers at this point. So realistically, Boba is got way more experience, as we're going to see with certain things. And he's also way older than they are. But
Yeah.
yeah, the dynamic is just kind of a kiddie version of what I think we see in the adult clones as well.
Yeah. I just every time I saw that name Jax, because I was watching this episode with the closed captioning on, I couldn't help but think of the Jacksonville Jaguars because JAX is the abbreviation
Ah,
you always see on the football scoreboard when they're talking about Jacksonville. So, but that aside,
for sure.
but the characterization of those kids was like spot on, right? Because
Mhm.
kids that age have that bit of bravado. They're kind of jockeying for position and who is the alpha amongst them. Not precisely, but you get what I mean. It's like
Mhm.
the art of the put down. I can make myself bigger by making you look smaller, uh,
Right.
type of situation. But Boba just kind of played it off all the way up until and including when they're there at that gunnery station and you'd have the Admiral Killian, who is he's being like the host of their little field trip here
Mhm.
and setting them up at this gun station. And then the one clone would like launch targets in there and give them all a chance. The first two fail horribly with just like scattering shots all over the place trying to hit this target. Boba takes it out in one hit. And then, since his nickname is Lucky, the clone trooper that's there at that station's like, yeah, you lived up to your nickname. And so he sends out 3 targets and Boba nails all 3 of them, one shot
Ah.
apiece out there. And so they haven't specifically told us that it's Boba Fett at that point in the episode, but that is like the big thing that sets Boba apart from all the other clones.
Oh, yeah. And it's kinda hard to even reframe your thinking around the fact that, "Oh, we're not supposed to know that this is Boba just yet,"
Yeah.
because, of course, we do after all of this time. But, yeah, I mean, there's definitely some major hints here that we're getting to see that are sort of pointing in that direction, for sure.
Indeed.
And, it's as you're thinking back on this as well with Boba being surrounded by all of these other clones just like him. It's he almost had to, I'm sure, take himself out of the idea that, oh my gosh, these are my brothers in a lot of ways, because he even says that to the one clone later on, you're not my brother. So it had to be hard though to see all of these other kids with his face.
Do
It's
you
one
think he
thing.
believe that though, because he seemed very torn about it over the course of the episode.
Right. Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. And that's what I'm saying about, could he have at some point turned his back on his rage and his vengeance and actually found sort of a new brethren with all of these other clones.
Yeah,
So,
stick a pin in
it's
that because we're going to get to that when we
yeah.
talk about another character that shows up in this episode. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, the notion here, one of the things I put down in the notes for us to talk about is like what he really thought of the other clones in this episode, because it's a full grown clone that in the reactor room, that he says like you were brothers, and that's when Boba says we're not brothers, but at the same time, when it comes to Aurra Sing, who shows up later, and others, he's very adamant that he doesn't want to hurt anybody else. And there does seem to be some familial attachment for him that,
Mhm.
because even with that one clone who says, like, we're brothers, when his helmet flies off after Boba smacks him in the head with the rifle, and his eyes get real big when he sees Django's face, when he sees his dad's face
Right.
on that
Right.
clone in that case. And it's like, he says it almost like he's trying to convince himself that this isn't, that I need to put my attachment aside. I realize attachment is very much a Jedi concept here, but he's under the influence of Aurra Sing at this point, which is like, you got to be cold blooded. And so he doesn't want to have those bonds to these other clones, but he can't help but feel them. And he was raised on Camino amongst all these clones all
Mhm.
the time. And we see that
True.
in the
Mhm.
book of Boba Fett. He's got those memories of being on Camino and the like. And so it's almost like he's trying to convince himself more than he actually believes it.
Oh, yeah. And just the fact that he did basically apologize to that clone,
Mm-hmm.
and he set the rifle for stun. He
Yeah.
didn't he didn't shoot him, he didn't kill him, he set it to stun. And that had to be kind of hard for him, as you said, seeing his face as an adult clone like his father, walking past all of those clone troopers when they first arrived, and the one kinda looked down and sorta gave the kids a little smirk, like a smile, and then the one little boy, like, just beamed right back up at him. So, yeah, I mean, it's gotta be hard because, I mean, Boba's probably, at some level, going through kind of an identity crisis, but yet he's carrying this burden of legacy, from his
Mm-hmm.
dad, and then the idea of exacting this revenge as well. There's a lot going on for young Boba.
Yeah. Yeah. Because he's like very resistant to the camaraderie that
Mhm.
Jax is trying to show him here. And then even later when he's like sneaking around the ship and he's planting the bomb that's supposed to kill Mace Windu, inside Mace's quarters, and ends up killing another clone. He's you know he's trying to talk his way out of situations. And on the one hand, that is a factor of he is so much younger than these other clones physically, not actually.
Mhm.
He's older than like every clone on the show
Right.
when it
Yeah.
comes down to it. He, but on the other hand, it's like, he's, as we said earlier, he's trying to talk himself out of rather the fact that these people don't mean anything to him. They clearly mean something to him at this time.
Right. Right.
But, Aurra Sing plants that bug in his ear that they aren't anything to him, that they're just people, and without any type of attachment, what are they worth? They're witnesses, as Aura points in at one point. So what do you think I'm going to do with them? They know too much and the like. But he doesn't see it that way. It's like, this is only about Mace Windu. It's, the rest of the crew is not supposed to get hurt. And I think it says something to his immaturity when he's following through on these things that Aura tells him. He plants the bomb in Mace Windu's quarters. It doesn't kill Mace, and he's alarmed when he hears that. And then later it comes out that it killed a clone. Well, he doesn't actually
Mhm.
ever hear about that. And when he sabotages the reactor and it causes half the ship to blow up, he doesn't seem to realize that he just killed a whole bunch of clones in the
Right.
process. And
Right.
I don't know if that's something we ever get on screen in the Clone Wars with how he feels about that. Because frankly, I don't think he has outside of this little story arc, he has any other interactions with clone troopers that we know of. Of course, we know
Yeah.
in the book of Boba Fett when they're getting ready to infiltrate that one planet so that the Mandalorian can find out about Moff Gideon and where Grogu is. He's like, let's just say that I might recognize my face. So,
Yes.
but at any
Such
rate,
a great line.
yeah.
Yeah. This is such a great exploration of morality. And again, just referring to the featurette and what Dave Filoni was saying about how, with Boba, he doesn't really understand the whole, deeper morality of all of this. And he doesn't understand, how the effect of all of this is,
Mhm.
such a profound thing. And yeah, and so it's just and Aurra Sing and all of this is just, I've often wondered, why is she so personally invested in Boba? And I think I've basically just landed on the fact that she's just using him as a tool, much
Oh yeah.
as Palpatine used Anakin as a tool. She was, raising him to step into the legacy again, of Django, and then eventually profit off of that. And that's just, awful, but that's Aurra Sing.
Right, right. I think when it comes to um, Aurra Sing, I'm thinking back to that conversation we had with Tom Gross several episodes ago on one of our Revenge of the Sith episodes when we were talking about alignment. When it comes down,
Oh,
I
yeah.
can't remember if that was actually during the episode or part of the pre-show conversation we were having here. She's just evil when it comes
Mhm.
down to it, and she's got these evil aims. And as you just said, she knows who Jango Fett was. He was the best bounty hunter in the galaxy. Well, if she can exert her influence over Boba and make him a tool that looks up to her for guidance, she wins in that regard. And when it comes to bounty hunting and these type of missions as an assassin, she's very pragmatic. She doesn't get emotional. She doesn't get attached. She doesn't care for these type of connections that Boba would be feeling for the other clones. They all share the same DNA. They are technically brothers in this situation. And she keeps pushing him to move beyond that, no matter the pull that he feels for this
Right.
type of brotherhood. They all share that he's a clone himself. And there is a camaraderie that's there that for the taking. If he wants it, he's just not embracing it. And he
Mhm.
has to fight against that. It's funny. It's the one of the criticisms of the book of Boba Fett is that, Boba Fett went from being this guy that had this reputation as the best bounty hunter in the galaxy, cold, calculating, unfeelingly. Like this episode of the Clone Wars, I think lends a lot to the book of Boba Fett in our
Oh, yeah.
interpretation of that character there.
Oh, absolutely. And, and as we're talking about this, I mean, it's very much kind of a twisted mirror of the Jedi Padawan relationship. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Where she's using pain and vengeance to teach Boba. And and she's teaching him that attachment leads to weakness. You mentioned attachment just a little bit ago. Well,
Mhm.
you look at this, I mean, and she's you've got to do this when he sends the rest of the cadets out into the airlock, and then he internalizes that lesson,
Mhm.
for lack of the any kind of empathy that he may have had. She's basically killing it at this point and just training him to be that ruthless person. And, I guess another thing too for Aura is that's really on her side is that she's got a built-in mole when it comes to any kind of infiltration that she wants to do with the clones, because he looks like the rest of the cadets. So why
Exactly.
not use him
Yeah.
again?
Yeah, there's definitely a nice little parallel when it comes to Boba and Anakin here with it.
Yeah.
It's Boba is a kid and he's not been completely brought into the adult way of thinking on this, which is cold and calculating that these are just people. They're essentially faceless and they're a means to an end. Django had that to some degree, and Aura
Mhm.
definitely has that now. But Boba's still a kid. He has not embraced that level of detachment yet, that level of coldness, that evilness. Or, we don't even know all of Aura Singh's backstory to understand why she is
Right.
the way she
Yeah.
is. But she is very much the, you got to look out for yourself. And there's alliances worth making. She's got one with Bosk, and now she's got one with Boba. But to her, people are just tools when it comes
Oh,
down
yeah.
to it.
Yeah,
So,
100%.
all
She
right.
just likes the chaos.
I cannot let this episode discussion go by without talking about the number 327, because that is Boba Fett's clone number in this episode. And of course, we know 327 as it shows up all over the place in Star Wars. Docking Bay 327 on the Death Star. That's the landing platform for the Millennium Falcon in Cloud City. The J-Type 327 that Padme escapes from
Nice.
Naboo on here. 327 shows up over and over again. You can find a dozen references if you go look for it on Wikipedia. But it just was a fun Easter egg for this episode that they didn't even highlight in the trivia guide for this episode. I couldn't believe that when I looked at it.
No, they didn't. There was only, like, 2 things in the trivia guide, and you did a great job here. Wow. They need to
Yeah,
hire
like,
you.
well, I was like very curious. As soon as I heard 327, I sat straight up. But the one of the things that was really interesting to me when I was researching 327 and what it means is, like, outside of Star Wars, it's considered an angel number, and okay, this is in quotes, an angel number associated with spiritual growth and positive change. And it comes from various Hebrew and other biblical references.
Really?
Yeah, I don't think that's what George Lucas was going for, though, because while Boba Fett may have gone through a change, I don't know that there was necessarily changes that you can assign to any one individual character the other times this number is used.
Mhm.
327 is also the number of the division that Aayla Secura commanded.
Oh, really? Oh, that's
Yeah,
cool.
right.
Okay.
And so the 327th Corps with Aayla Secura and Commander Bly, of course, they killed her. So,
Yeah.
but I also saw references that 327 was part of Mark Hamill's phone number.
Oh, really?
And that's why George Lucas was incorporating into the films as an inside joke.
Oh
But
my gosh, that's great.
yeah, I don't know. It was just but again, 327, even though it may not have any deeper meaning, whether you ascribe to that whole angel number theory or not, it is an important number of Star Wars because it just keeps coming up over and over and over again.
Yeah, and wow, what great research you had there. I'm impressed. Most
Thank you.
impressive.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I wouldn't even have put some of those together, but now that you say, like, Docking Bay 327, the J-Type 327 Nubian, the number that made me sit up and I had to, like, go back and say, "Okay, did I hear that right?" Is Boba saying that he was part of the 322nd group, and at
Mhm.
first I thought he said the 332nd group, and I was like, "Holy cow, that eventually becomes Ahsoka's troop."
Right.
So
Right.
but it wasn't, it was the 322nd, not the 332nd.
Yeah. Think of how many clones that actually means that were out there. They have, like, in the
Oof,
hundreds of
yeah.
groups. So, all right. Well, we are going longer than we usually do on our Clone War reviews episodes here. So let's highlight just a few of the things here. We've pretty much talked about everything, I think, when it comes to Boba Fett. What'd you think about Admiral Killian?
Oh, he was just your typical, go down with the ship. He had that great kind of Scottish accent. I'm
Mm-hmm.
assuming it was Scottish anyways. And, he was standing for everything that an admiral, quote unquote, should be. But it was really cool the way that he kept it together in that, when he was talking to the clones, he's like, oh, yeah, like this will be a great story for you to tell your friends, when you get back, and I'm totally butchering the accent at
Yeah.
this point, but then he was like, "All right, we gotta get out of here, like, the ship's going down." So,
Mhm.
to his credit, he was very calm and cool in that way, but yet there was one line that he said that I thought, "Oh, so that's how you really feel." Where he said something to the effect of, "Yeah, and the Jedi." Like he said it almost in a really disrespectful kind of a way. And so I thought, I wonder if he resented having the Jedi on his cruiser,
See,
like
I didn't
almost
pick that up
outranked.
so much, is that when the ship was going down, and Anakin was telling him, we have to abandon ship.
Mhm.
And Killian said, no, the Admiral goes down, stays on the ship. And essentially, like the old classic line, the captain goes down with the ship, that type of thing. But he follows it up with saying, I wouldn't expect a Jedi to understand. And at first, that line really bugged me because it seemed kind of I don't know, there's certain groups in various level of importance. And then, it's like, it's something that you're not part of this group, you wouldn't understand. And it's a way of kind of like inflating the importance of the group,
Mhm.
type of a thing. And of course, Killian's not a Jedi. He's not a clone. He is an enlisted officer. And there's certain things that he believes in that he doesn't think a Jedi will understand. But then it dawned on me over the course of the conversation what he was saying. He's attached to his ship. He's attached to his command. And he knows the Jedi don't believe in attachment. And so when he's saying, I'm going down with the ship,
Mm.
this isn't something a Jedi would understand. I'm not sure that that is quite the insult that I first took it to be, which is him saying, like, there's a difference between us. You all don't invest yourself in things like a ship. You don't have those type of attachments. This is important to me. Everyone
Mhm.
that's on this
Mhm.
ship invested their lives, their safety into my well-being, and this ship is going down. I owe it to them to see it to the end,
Mhm.
which is
Oh,
something a
yeah.
Jedi would never believe.
Those are some great points, and I hadn't even considered that, and I think that that is a great illustration of, as you said, just the fact that they're so invested in their ship and they take so much ownership of it, and
Mhm.
so it's a very different lens when you look at it that way. Thank you.
Oh, of course, of course. Anything else from this episode you want to touch on before we wrap it up?
Well, I was trying to figure out, and I looked this up, and they mentioned the planet Vancor,
Mhm.
Vanquor, and I was thinking, okay, why are they choosing this particular planet? But it really didn't have much of a reason. Like there wasn't a mission per se. It was just sort of a random planet that they ended up, having this whole thing happen around. Um,
Mhm.
but other than that, I mean, there's again, it's mainly the whole Boba thing, obviously, and his
Mhm.
morality and his wrestling with a lot of those kinds of things. So, but yeah, I think the only other thing is again Mace and Anakin's relationship in this episode. Even though Mace is kind of teasing Anakin about showing off, they still have such an easy relationship. And
Yeah.
I often, now that we're watching all of these episodes again, it just hit me how actually close they kind of became,
Mhm.
which makes Revenge of the Sith even harder to
Much more
watch.
tragic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And looking ahead, it's like you kind of wish there was an episode somewhere in here in the Clone Wars where there's something that maybe shatters that trust between Mace and Anakin beyond, for lack of a better description, the temper tantrums Anakin throws in the Jedi
Mhm.
Council when he's appointed to the council but not made a master and the like, and just because he's close to the Chancellor here, because we've seen a number of episodes now where Mace and Anakin have worked together. And while it may not have been like 100% hunky dory here, they had a good working relationship. They just fought
Right.
the Zillow Beast together, for crying out loud.
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah,
So when Mace
yeah,
says, "I don't trust him," why wouldn't he trust him after all of this?
yeah. Well, if anything, if you want to look for the silver lining in that analysis, it really shows you how much Anakin's relationship with the Chancellor bugs Mace Windu. The
Mhm.
Mace are supposed to be
Mhm.
above all these, the Jedi are supposed to be above all these politics. And here's Anakin like deeply embedded with everything that the Chancellor is doing. And the Chancellor
Mhm.
is exerting control on him when we've seen how much Mace does not trust the Chancellor at this
Right,
point.
yeah, in
So,
every type of instance that Mace has been in dealings with Palpatine, he's had reasons to just keep compiling why he
mhm.
doesn't like Palpatine or doesn't
Yeah.
trust him.
And he's not wrong in the least
Right.
bit.
So true.
Okay. I love this conversation. This was great. This was an
Yeah.
episode I didn't expect us to have this much to talk about, but this has been one of our longer discussions of the Clone Wars recently. So
Yeah,
cool.
indeed.
Uh, Well, I can't wait to get to the next episode next week, Jay. Okay. Well, with that said, thank you all of our listeners, for joining us for this episode of Podcast Stardust and our most recent discussion of the Clone Wars. We hope you've enjoyed it. And if you want to see what happens next and our discussion of it, then make sure you subscribe to the podcast. So next Monday, that episode will be downloaded for you automatically. And once you've done that, and if you're feeling generous, we'd love it if you give us a rating review on your podcast of choice. We've been picking up some of those lately. It does help the show with its growth, and that means a lot to us. If you want to find more episodes of the podcast, which are going to be more than what's available on your podcast of choice, head over to retrozapp.com. Our entire catalog, all previous 935 episodes are there. And once you've done that, you can find a lot of other great shows over there covering all aspects of Greek culture. Enjoy Stuff is a particular highlight. I'm quite fond of everything that Jay and Josh does, and they've got other shows such as Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Case Files and the Superhero Suite. They cover everything, past, present. It's a great network of shows they got going on. Jay, remind everybody where we can be found online and social media one more time.
Absolutely. So yeah, there's a lot of goodness going on RetroZap. We can be found on Facebook and Instagram at Podcast Stardust. And again, just want to say a quick hello there to all of our new listeners. And especially if you are listening to this episode as your first episode of Podcast Stardust, there's a lot to love. So, as we just said, we've got 935 other episodes that you can enjoy. And if you find some joy in those, please let us know. And you can also check out all of our Pinterest boards for lots of fun ideas for everything Star Wars. And then our YouTube channel. So we have our traditional YouTube as well as YouTube Music. So in addition to our other platforms where you can stream and listen to the show, those two are great places to go and subscribe and share those out as well. And then we also have our TeePublic store, and the link to that is in our show notes. So if you need a spruce up for your closet, especially with the crisper fall weather arriving here in the northern hemisphere of this planet, at least, we do have sweatshirts as well as long sleeve shirts and even blankets that you can wrap yourself up in with some Podcast Artist logos on those. And the link to that is in our show notes.
All right. So upcoming on the show on Wednesday, we are getting into part 2 of our discussion of the High Republic Trials of the Jedi by Charles Soule. It's a really great conversation, so make sure you come back for that. And then on Friday, assuming there is news to talk about, that's what we'll be doing. If not, we'll have something else to talk about on Star Wars, because Jay and I always do. But with that having been said, thanks for listening to episode 936 of Podcast Stardust, everyone. Have a great week, and until next time, may the Force be with you.